How to handle an avoidant partner. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're giving your all to a relationship, but the other person just keeps pulling away? Like no matter how much love, patience, and understanding you bring, they still create distance? That feeling of chasing, of being on an emotional roller coaster? It's exhausting, right? But here's the truth. It's not about you. It's about patterns, conditioning, and learning how to meet your partner where they are instead of where you wish they'd be. I once worked with someone who was deeply in love with their partner, but every time things got intimate, boom, the partner pulled away. It created this cycle of frustration and heartbreak, but you know what? The moment they stopped focusing on what they weren't getting and started understanding the deeper needs driving the avoidance, everything changed. And that's what I want for you. Most people in relationships with an avoidant partner take their partner's behavior as a personal attack. They think, why are they pulling away? What did I do wrong? Why won't they open up to me? And that's the first major mistake, making it about you. The truth is, an avoidant partner's tendency to withdraw isn't because they don't love you. It's not because you're not enough. It's because they've been wired over years of conditioning to see intimacy as a risk rather than a source of comfort. When we understand this, we stop reacting emotionally and start responding intelligently. A person with avoidant tendencies has likely spent a lifetime protecting themselves from emotional vulnerability. Maybe they grew up in a home where showing emotions was seen as weakness. Maybe they had caregivers who were inconsistent, so they learned that depending on others was dangerous. Whatever the case, they built walls, not because they don't care, but because to them, closeness feels like losing control. Now, here's the big problem. If you take their avoidance personally, you'll react in ways that push them even further away. Let's say you text them something important and they don't respond for hours or even days. What do most people do? They get anxious. They send another text, maybe a longer one. They start questioning what's wrong. The avoidant partner, already feeling overwhelmed, sees this as pressure and withdraws even more. The anxious partner then panics, demands reassurance, or accuses them of being cold. Now, instead of creating connection, the cycle of distance and frustration gets worse. But what if you approached it differently? What if instead of reacting to their distance with insecurity, you met it with confidence? Imagine they pull away and instead of chasing, you maintain your center. You go about your day, you focus on your own energy. And when they come back, you welcome them without resentment. That changes everything. Suddenly they don't feel suffocated. They don't feel like they're being pulled into something they can't handle. They feel safe because you're demonstrating that connection doesn't have to mean losing their autonomy. This is why the first step in handling an avoidant partner is understanding that their behavior is about them, not you. It's about their wiring, their fears, and their past experiences. Your job is not to fix them. It's to shift the way you engage with them. The moment you stop taking their avoidance personally, you gain power over the dynamic. You stop reacting emotionally and start acting strategically. Now, some people might say, but if they really love me, wouldn't they just be more available? And here's the hard truth. Love alone doesn't override deep-seated patterns. An avoidant partner can love you deeply, but if their nervous system is wired to see intimacy as a threat, their instinct will be to create space when things get too close. That's their programming. But programming can change over time if the right conditions exist. And those conditions require patience, understanding, and most importantly, a partner who doesn't feed into the cycle of anxiety and avoidance. Think about it this way. If someone has spent their whole life avoiding deep emotional connections, what's going to make them feel safe enough to change? Certainly not pressure, definitely not accusations, and absolutely not neediness. What makes an avoidant partner feel secure enough to open up is knowing that they can be in a relationship without losing themselves. That means they need to feel that you are steady, that you're not relying on them to regulate your emotions, and that you're not going to punish them for needing space. Does this mean you should accept being emotionally neglected? Absolutely not. There's a huge difference between understanding someone's avoidance and excusing behavior that hurts you. You can be compassionate toward their struggles without tolerating a relationship that leaves you starved for connection. The key is recognizing whether their avoidance is something they're willing to work on or if it's just a pattern they refuse to address. At the end of the day, the way you handle an avoidant partner will determine whether the relationship grows or falls apart. If you make their distance about you, you'll react in ways that reinforce their fears. If you shift your mindset and stop personalizing their behavior, you create the space for a new dynamic, one where love and security can actually flourish. When you're in a relationship with an avoidant partner, one of the most important things to realize is that you cannot control their behavior, only your own. Too many people get caught up in trying to change their partner, trying to make them more open, more affectionate, more available. But here's the truth. The more you focus on what they're not doing, the more powerless you feel. And when you feel powerless, you start acting from a place of desperation, anxiety, and fear. That energy is not attractive. That energy does not create connection. In fact, it does the exact opposite. It pushes them further away. What you need to do is shift your focus. Instead of trying to control them, you take full control of your own energy. That means showing up as the strongest, most confident, most emotionally grounded version of yourself. Because when you radiate that kind of presence, you create an environment where they feel safe, and when they feel safe, they're more likely to step toward you instead of pulling away. Think about it like this. If you're constantly chasing someone who is running, what do? They keep running. But if you stop chasing, if you stand still with confidence, they may start to slow down. They may even turn around and come back. That's the dynamic at play in relationships with avoidant partners. The more you chase, the more they retreat. The more you lean into your own power, the more space you create for them to feel comfortable coming closer. This is where most people get it wrong. They think that if their partner is pulling away, the solution is to lean in harder, to over-communicate, to demand reassurance. But what actually works is the opposite. You match their energy without withdrawing your love. You hold steady. If they take a step back, you don't panic. You don't overanalyze. You don't make it about your worth. Instead, you redirect your focus back to yourself, back to your own peace, back to your own life. That shift changes everything. Now, this doesn't mean you play games. This isn't about pretending not to care or using manipulation. It's about genuinely cultivating the kind of self-confidence that allows you to remain secure even when your partner is struggling with it. It's about knowing deep in your core that their avoidance does not define you, that their emotional struggles are theirs to navigate, that your happiness and emotional well-being are in your hands, not theirs. One of the biggest mistakes people make when dealing with an avoidant partner is allowing their emotions to be dictated by their partner's actions. If the avoidant partner is engaged and present, they feel good. If the avoidant partner pulls away, they spiral into anxiety and self-doubt. That's giving away way too much power. You need to take that power back. You need to become the kind of person whose mood, confidence, and self-worth do not fluctuate based on whether someone else is leaning in or pulling away. Because when you reach that level of self-mastery, you become unshakable. Here's a practical way to start shifting your energy. Every time you feel the urge to react out of fear, whether that's sending a long text, demanding answers, or over-explaining your emotions, pause, take a breath, ask yourself, am I acting from a place of security or am I acting from a place of fear? If the answer is fear, stop. Do not engage. Instead, do something that grounds you in your own power. Go for a walk, hit the gym, meditate, call a friend. Do something that reminds you of your own worth outside of the relationship. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Another key part of controlling your energy is learning to self-soothe. Avoidant partners often struggle to meet their partner's emotional needs in the way the partner wants. If you rely entirely on them to make you feel secure, you're setting yourself up for constant disappointment. Instead, start building the internal tools to regulate your own emotions. When they pull away, remind yourself, I am safe, I am whole, I am enough. This kind of inner dialogue rewires your brain over time. It teaches you to anchor your security within yourself rather than in the unpredictable actions of another person. When you show up in your relationship as someone who is emotionally strong and self-sufficient, everything changes. You're no longer reacting to their fears, you're leading with confidence. And that confidence is magnetic. Your avoidant partner will start to see that connection with you doesn't mean losing themselves. They'll see that you are a source of warmth, not pressure. They'll feel drawn to you because you represent something different, stability, safety, a love that isn't demanding but instead inviting. At the end of the day, your power lies in how you show up. If you want a relationship that feels fulfilling, you need to stop focusing on what they're not doing and start focusing on what you are bringing to the table. Because when you shift your energy, when you embody security, when you stop reacting and start leading with strength, the entire dynamic transforms. Now, when you're in a relationship with an avoidant partner, one of the biggest challenges is understanding their triggers without enabling their behavior. This is a fine line to walk because on one hand, you want to be compassionate and create a safe space for them. On the other hand, you don't want to tolerate neglect or accept a relationship that leaves you feeling unfulfilled. The key is to recognize what sets them off, adjust your approach in a way that fosters connection, but also stand firm in your own needs. An avoidant person often withdraws when they feel overwhelmed, pressured, or criticized. This is their defense mechanism, not necessarily a reflection of how they feel about you. They've likely spent years, maybe even their entire lives, associating closeness with loss of control, The more emotional weight they feel in a relationship, the more they instinctively back away. But here's where most people get it wrong. When an avoidant partner starts pulling away, the anxious partner panics. They demand answers, ask for reassurance, and try to force a connection in that moment. The avoidant person, already feeling trapped, sees this as confirmation that closeness is dangerous, and they retreat even further. To break this cycle, the first step is understanding their emotional landscape. Recognize that their withdrawal isn't necessarily about you. They may have been conditioned to believe that emotions are burdensome, that relying on someone else makes them weak, or that intimacy leads to disappointment. When they create distance, they are not always doing it to hurt you. Sometimes they're doing it because they don't know how to manage their emotions in a relationship. But here's the important part. Understanding this does not mean you should accept being emotionally starved. It doesn't mean you should keep quiet when your needs aren't met. This is where setting boundaries comes in. You need to find the balance between giving them space and making sure your own emotional well-being isn't sacrificed in the process. Let's say your partner shuts down when you bring up emotional topics. Instead of saying, "You never open up to me, why don't you care?" which will only reinforce their fears, try approaching it differently. You can say, "I really value feeling connected to you. I don't want to pressure you, but it would mean a lot if we could talk about this when you feel ready." That subtle shift changes the entire conversation. Instead of making them feel trapped, you're giving them room while still expressing your needs. The goal is to communicate in a way that fosters safety, not resistance. When an avoidant person feels like they have the freedom to come closer on their own terms, they're much more likely to engage. But if they feel like they're being pulled into something they can't handle, they will instinctively shut down. At the same time, you cannot be the only one doing the work. You can't carry the emotional weight of the relationship. While it's important to understand their triggers, it's equally important to recognize when their behavior is affecting your well-being. If you find yourself constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to bring up your feelings because you don't want to push them away, that's a sign of an unhealthy dynamic. You should never have to silence yourself or shrink your needs just to keep the peace. Instead of enabling avoidance, encourage small steps toward connection. If they struggle with deep conversations, start with lighter, more positive interactions that build trust. If they withdraw during conflict, give them time, but also set a boundary that communication needs to happen at some point. For example, if they disappear for days when things get tough, you can say, "I respect that you need space, but I also need communication. If you ever need time alone, I'd appreciate it if you could let me know," instead of shutting me out completely. This sets an expectation without making them feel suffocated. A relationship with an avoidant partner requires patience, but patience should not come at the cost of your own happiness. The key is to approach them with understanding while also making sure your own needs are being met. You cannot force someone to change, but you can influence the relationship dynamic by responding differently. When you shift the way you communicate, when you remove blame and instead create a space where they feel safe to open up, you change the entire energy of the relationship. However, if they refuse to meet you halfway, if they consistently disregard your emotional needs, then it's time to ask yourself a hard question. Is this relationship truly fulfilling? Because understanding someone's wounds is one thing, but sacrificing your own emotional well-being to accommodate them is another. A healthy relationship is a two-way street, and both partners must be willing to do the work. Patience is one of the most powerful tools you can develop when navigating a relationship with an avoidant partner. Many people misunderstand patience, thinking it means waiting indefinitely, tolerating neglect, or accepting less than they deserve. But real patience isn't passive, it's active, it's intentional. It's about giving your partner the space they need while also holding firm to your own standards for a loving and fulfilling relationship. An avoidant partner operates on a different emotional timeline. While you may crave immediate connection, deep conversations, and emotional intimacy, they often need more time to process their feelings. Not because they don't care, but because emotional closeness triggers their deepest fears of losing control or being overwhelmed. If you try to force them to open up before they're ready, they will resist even more. That's why patience is essential. It allows them to move toward connection at their own pace rather than feeling pushed into it. But patience does not mean suppressing your own needs or waiting endlessly for them to change. Many people in relationships with avoidant partners get stuck in a cycle of hoping that one day their partner will suddenly become more affectionate, more expressive, or more available. They hold on to glimpses of connection, thinking that if they just wait long enough, things will improve. This kind of patience is actually avoidance in disguise. It's a way of avoiding the hard truth that change only happens when both people are actively working on the relationship. Real patience is rooted in self-respect. It's about understanding that growth takes time, but also recognizing when progress isn't happening. If your partner is making an effort, if they're slowly learning to communicate better, to be more present, to show up for you emotionally, That's when patience is valuable. But if they continue to shut down, withdraw, and resist any form of intimacy without making an effort to improve, patience is no longer helpful. It becomes an excuse to tolerate behavior that isn't serving you. A key part of developing patience is learning to manage your own emotions when they pull away. It's natural to feel anxious or frustrated when your partner distances themselves, but reacting emotionally, getting upset, demanding answers, or chasing them only makes the cycle worse. Instead, patience teaches you to stay grounded. When they withdraw, instead of panicking, you breathe. You remind yourself that their behavior is about them, not you. You don't take it personally. You trust that if they care about the relationship, they will return when they're ready. This doesn't mean you ignore your feelings. It's okay to feel disappointed when they pull away. It's okay to wish they were more present, but rather than reacting impulsively, you take a step back and ask yourself, what do I need right now? If the answer is reassurance, find ways to give it to yourself rather than relying on them to provide it. If the answer is connection, turn to friends, family, or hobbies that bring you joy. When you cultivate emotional resilience, you stop making their behavior the center of your world. At the same time, patience should be paired with clear boundaries. Being patient doesn't mean allowing yourself to be neglected. If your partner needs space, that's fine, but there should still be an expectation of communication and respect. You can say, I understand you need time to process things, and I want to respect that. But I also need to feel connected and valued in this relationship. Can we find a way to balance both? This approach honors both of your needs instead of making it one-sided. Another important aspect of patience is celebrating small progress. Avoidant partners don't change overnight, but if you notice they're trying, if they're opening up even slightly, if they're making an effort to stay present during difficult conversations, if they're showing affection in ways that feel natural to them, acknowledge it. Positive reinforcement matters. Let them know you appreciate their efforts, no matter how small. When they feel safe and valued rather than criticized, they're more likely to continue growing. Finally, patience means knowing when to walk away. If you've given them space, if you've communicated your needs clearly, if you've done everything you can to create a healthy dynamic and they still refuse to meet you halfway, it's time to ask yourself whether this relationship is right for you. Patience is powerful, but it should never come at the cost of your own happiness. A relationship should feel like a partnership, not a waiting game. When you practice true patience that is strong, intentional, and self-respecting, you create the conditions for a healthier, more fulfilling relationship. You allow space for your partner to grow, but you also honor your own needs, and in the process, you gain something even more valuable than the relationship itself, a deep sense of inner peace and emotional resilience that will serve you in every area of your life. In a relationship with an avoidant partner, it's easy to feel like you're constantly walking a tightrope, trying to connect without pushing too hard, wanting to be close without making them retreat. But one of the most powerful shifts you can make is to focus on creating safety rather than demanding connection. An avoidant person often pulls away because they fear being overwhelmed, controlled, or emotionally engulfed. If you can create an environment where they feel safe instead of pressured, they are far more likely to open up and move toward you rather than away. Safety in a relationship doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations or suppressing your needs. It means fostering an environment where both of you feel secure enough to be yourselves without fear of judgment or emotional explosions. For an avoidant partner, this is especially important because they are wired to see emotional intimacy as a potential threat. If every deep conversation turns into a high-stakes emotional demand, they will instinctively withdraw. But if they begin to associate connection with peace rather than pressure, they can start to rewire their response to intimacy. The way you respond to their distancing behaviors plays a huge role in whether they feel safe. If they pull away and you react with panic, sending multiple messages, demanding answers, or criticizing them for being unavailable, they will perceive closeness as stressful rather than soothing. Instead, if you remain calm, self-assured, and non-reactive, they will slowly begin to see that intimacy doesn't have to come with pressure or conflict. One of the most effective ways to create safety is to master the art of communication. Avoided partners struggle with emotional conversations not because they don't care, but because they often don't have the tools to navigate them. If you approach them with accusations, they will shut down. But if you approach them with curiosity and calmness, they will feel less threatened. Instead of saying, "You never talk about your feelings," try, "I'd love to understand what's going on in your mind when you need space." This small shift invites dialogue rather than defensiveness. Another crucial part of creating safety is consistency. Avoidant individuals often have a history of instability in relationships, whether in childhood or past romantic experiences. So they are hypersensitive to unpredictability. If you're sometimes warm and understanding, but other times reactive and demanding, they won't know what to expect. They need to feel that your presence in their life is steady, not conditional on how emotionally available they are in any given moment. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means learning to regulate your emotions, so you're not driven by anxiety or frustration when they withdraw. Respecting their need for space is another key element. Many people mistake this for indifference, but it's actually a sign of emotional intelligence. When you give them room without resentment, they start to see that closeness with you doesn't mean suffocation. This doesn't mean tolerating emotional neglect, but it does mean recognizing that their way of processing emotions is different from yours. If they feel like they can take space without being punished, they are more likely to return willingly rather than out of obligation. Equally important is acknowledging and appreciating their efforts, no matter how small. Avoidant partners may not express love in traditional ways, but that doesn't mean they don't care. If they make an effort, whether it's initiating a conversation, responding more openly, or showing affection in their own way, recognize it. When they feel that their attempts at closeness are valued rather than criticized for not being enough, they will be more willing to keep trying. Creating safety in a relationship isn't about changing the dynamic between you. It's about leading with strength, calmness, and self-assurance rather than fear. When they start to see that connection with you feels safe rather than suffocating, the walls they built will begin to come down. And when that happens, real intimacy can finally take root. Self-respect is the foundation of any healthy relationship, but when you're involved with an avoidant partner, it becomes even more crucial. It's easy to lose yourself in the cycle of chasing them, analyzing their every move, and bending over backward to make the relationship work. But the truth is, the more you prioritize them over yourself, the more the balance of power shifts and the less fulfilling the relationship becomes. The key to breaking free from this cycle is to focus on maintaining your own self-respect, knowing your worth, setting clear boundaries, and refusing to settle for less than you deserve. One of the biggest mistakes people make in relationships with avoidant partners is believing that if they just love them enough, if they just prove their loyalty, the avoidant person will eventually change and become more open. But this mindset places all the power in their hands and leaves you in a position of constantly trying to earn love rather than expecting to receive it freely. Real love is not something you should have to work for. It should flow naturally between two people who are equally invested. When you prioritize your self-respect, you stop trying to fix them or manage their emotional responses. You recognize that their avoidance is their issue, not yours to solve. Instead of wondering what you can do to make them open up, you start asking yourself a different question. Is this relationship meeting my needs? That shift in perspective is incredibly powerful because it puts you back in control of your own happiness. Part of maintaining self-respect is setting boundaries. Many people in relationships with avoidant partners become so focused on not pushing them away that they fail to express their own needs. They tolerate emotional distance, lack of communication, or inconsistent affection because they fear that if they ask for more, their partner will leave. But avoiding difficult conversations doesn't make the relationship stronger, it just makes it more one-sided. Boundaries are not about controlling the other person. They are about defining what you will and won't accept. For example, if your avoidant partner frequently disappears for days without communication, you might be tempted to excuse it, thinking that's just how they are. But self-respect means acknowledging how that behavior affects you. Instead of silently accepting it, you might say, I understand that you need space sometimes, but I also need communication. If you need time alone, I'd appreciate it if you could let me know instead of disappearing. This isn't about demanding that they change. It's about making it clear that your needs matter too. Another essential aspect of self-respect is refusing to engage in patterns of emotional chasing. When your partner pulls away, do you immediately try to close the gap by sending texts, asking what's wrong, or over-explaining your feelings? If so, you're likely reinforcing the avoidant dynamic. The more you chase, the more they run. But when you stand firm in your own confidence, when you let them take space without reacting out of fear, you shift the power dynamic. You send the message that you are whole and complete on your own, that their emotional availability does not define your worth. Self-respect also means walking away when necessary. It's one thing to be patient with an avoidant partner who is making an effort, even if progress is slow, but it's another thing entirely to stay in a relationship where your emotional needs are continually ignored. If you find yourself constantly making excuses for their behavior, tolerating emotional neglect, or feeling like you're the only one trying, it's time to ask yourself whether this relationship is truly serving you. Many people stay in unhealthy relationships because they fear being alone, but true self-respect means knowing that you'd rather be alone than in a relationship that diminishes you. When you have a strong sense of self-worth, you don't settle for breadcrumbs of affection. You don't accept inconsistency as the norm. You recognize that love should feel fulfilling, not exhausting. One of the most empowering things you can do is shift your focus back to yourself. Instead of spending all your energy analyzing your avoidant partner, invest that energy into your own growth. Pursue your passions, strengthen your friendships, take care of your physical and mental well-being. The more you build a life that fulfills you outside of the relationship, the less you'll tolerate a dynamic that drains you. When you stand in your self-respect, everything everything changes. You stop seeking validation from someone who struggles to give it, and you start validating yourself. You stop making excuses for their emotional distance, and you start honoring your own needs. And in doing so, you not only create a healthier relationship dynamic, but you also set a standard for how you deserve to be treated, not just in this relationship, but in every relationship moving forward. A relationship with an avoidant partner can feel like an emotional puzzle, one where you're constantly trying to fit the pieces together, but never quite getting the full picture. But the truth is, no relationship should leave you feeling uncertain, unworthy, or emotionally drained. Love is not about endlessly chasing someone who refuses to meet you halfway. It's about mutual effort, respect, and the willingness to grow together. The key to handling an avoidant partner is not about fixing them. It's about understanding the dynamic, communicating in a way that fosters trust, and most importantly, maintaining your own self-respect. You cannot force someone to change, but you can shift the way you engage in the relationship. By understanding their triggers without enabling their behavior, practicing patience without losing yourself, and creating a space of emotional safety, you increase the chances of a deeper connection. But ultimately, love should not feel like a battle for attention or validation. If you are constantly sacrificing your own happiness, it's time to step back and ask, is this truly the love I deserve? You have the power to set the tone for your relationships. You have the power to walk away from what no longer serves you. You have the power to create a life where love is fulfilling, not exhausting. No matter what happens, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself. Honor that, and everything else will fall into place. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your willingness to grow. I appreciate you showing up for yourself today, because that's where real change begins. Stay strong, stay true to your worth, and never settle for anything less than the love and respect you deserve.